meeting is being recorded.
All right. So, Michael, I'm excited to talk to you about your new book that was released, at the end of February, right?
A little while ago. I think I have the date written down, but not too long ago. It's still available.
Yes. Yeah. So a few weeks ago. And what's the name of your book?
The book is Relationship Repair for Men, and the subtitle is something like Counterintuitive Solutions. No, it's not it. Counterintuitive Things to Do. Hold on a second. I have it on another screen here. The original title, I swear I really did write a book. Hold on a second.
Turns out he didn't write the book.
The original title was actually going to be 13 Unnatural Behaviors.
A little provocative.
Yeah, so it's going to be 13 Unnatural Behaviors because I wanted people to accept from the get-go, specifically the men who were going to be reading this book. I wanted them to accept that a lot of the behaviors that I want to recommend that I believe will actually make positive differences in the relationships will not come naturally to them.
Yeah.
In fact, more likely they would hear about some of them and they would think, I'm sorry, what? That doesn't seem right. I've never been told to do anything like that. And that's the point. I want to address issues in relationships that have resulted from people doing things that came naturally to them, despite not actually being that helpful. Yeah. So I pulled it up here now. So the title of the book is Relationship Repair for Men, Counterintuitive Behaviors that Restore Love to Struggling Relationships.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I like that background around what the original title was, because that really, and then you kind of go in to share more about it. Yeah. So I'm curious. So why do you think these methods, do you believe they're inherently counterintuitive, or do you feel like this is more needed in the culture we are in today? That might be a loaded question.
I think there's a little bit of both. I think, so for example, it is very intuitive for us to behave in ways that we believe are going to elicit approval.
Yes.
That's intuitive. And that, I believe, is cultural, and I also believe it's human, it's genetic.
I agree.
I believe that many of us, maybe not all of us, but many of us have ancestors from millions of thousands of, I don't know, whenever the Paleolithic period was, that were living in small groups that probably a lot of the time experienced a real scarcity of resources. And so it made sense for people to associate disapproval with death, because if there's a scarcity of resources and one is not measurably contributing, if somebody's worth isn't proven through their actions, and then it would make sense that it would be impractical to feed them before feeding somebody that the rest of the group approves of.
Definitely. Yeah.
So our approval-seeking behavior, our internal drive for approval-seeking behavior, I believe, partly stems from that, from wanting to please others, so that we could maintain the protection of the group. We would not get ostracized. We could be fed. But then it's also quite cultural. Especially I believe for men, because most of us, men and women, have been raised mostly by women,
Yep.
right? Most of us, well, many have grown up with single mothers. Many whose parents are still together would still interact a whole lot more with mom.
Yep.
So many of us, our behaviors were more shaped by mom.
Yeah.
And and we learned to associate mom's approval with being loved and being fed and being taken care of, and then also most of us mostly had female teachers.
Yeah.
So pretty much, so most of us experienced most of our interactions with authority figures, with those authority figures being women. So it makes a whole lot of sense. A boy grows up, the external feedback about whether or not he is a good boy would depend on messages that he's getting from his mother, from teachers.
Yep.
And then enters into a relationship, and and then it makes sense how a lot of these habits or a lot of these behaviors would then continue, would then be transferred over. So the answer to your question about these behaviors, about how intuitive behaviors that might not be helpful in relationships, are they cultural? I think there are certainly cultural circumstances that are contributing to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like your answer too, because I know we have a lot of similarities in the way we think, and I think the ideologies that we kind of have worked off of. Because like you're using your example, a lot of people are talking about people pleasing behaviors and so forth. And yes, it can become extreme in cases of, having childhood trauma and so forth, because it wasn't just this evolutionary perspective that you're talking about, but it was more of this obvious life or death situation, right? And so that's valid. I'm not denying that, but that voice is so loud now. I think we often forget that normal evolutionary perspective, that even if you didn't have significant trauma in childhood and so forth, that it's still something to really look at and address. And I think that people assume if they do people please, well, I must have some real serious wounding and trauma, when that's not necessarily the case, because I believe, like you're saying, that there is an innate drive for that from, like you're talking about. So I think that's an important point to bring up, because I feel like that's been lost in the discourse.
Certainly, and it's not something for people to be ashamed of at all. In fact, human beings in general do a lot of things naturally that are not good for them.
Yeah.
Our drive to ingest as much calories as possible is natural, and but that is well adapted for a situation where where there isn't an unlimited supply of
yes,
right? So so we came by a whole lot of drives or a whole lot of instincts quite naturally, but in a lot of us in our current modern circumstances, they don't serve us well. And I think that this applies even to things that aren't necessarily even about relationships, just about mental health. If you consider how so if you're an individual who lives in a group that is, for the most part, in the wilderness, a startle response, or the drive to freeze, flee, or fight. What is it? Flight or fight or freeze?
Yeah, fight,
Um,
freeze, collapse, cement, and all the,
right.
yeah,
I
there's a
forget
lot now.
catchphrases very fast, but that drive, um, would serve us very well if there was a reasonable chance that any unexplained sound that we hear 15 feet away, if there was a reasonable chance that it was a dangerous predator,
Mhm.
then it would serve us very well.
Right.
Uncertainty, us having an anxious and fearful response to uncertainty as we were evolving as a human species, it helped keep us alive.
Yeah.
Um, only relatively recently are we recognizing that that a fearful response to uncertainty is not going to promote our contentment.
Right. Right.
And and we're probably never going to evolve out of it, because contentment, especially as we get up into middle age and we're not planning on having any more children, contentment doesn't necessarily contribute to the propagation of the species,
Mm-hmm.
right? So yeah, so there's a lot of really wonderful natural drives that we have that that don't serve us well.
Yeah.
um, you know, and I believe that this also applies to a lot of the behaviors that we find intuitive in relationships.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Yeah, I think these are all important points. And with the way society is now, it requires kind of unlearning the intuitive ways and trying on, I guess you would say, your counterintuitive suggestions. Yeah, I like that. So tell me about how, because I know you've developed these with working with clients for how, I guess, how long have you been working with clients for now?
I've been working with clients since 2015.
Okay,
So
awesome.
8 years, just about, yeah, 8 years.
Great. So what's it usually like for them to learn these new skills and then go home and implement them?
Yes,
That's the hard part.
yes. So there are lots of responses, and it's all really fun, and it all there's usually a learning curve where these activities, these ideas are so very counterintuitive, that it usually will take more than one check-in, more than one
Yeah.
discussion about them, right? But but that doesn't mean that the people aren't able to make use of them. It's about tweaking.
Yes.
So I'll give it an example. I'll give an example. So most mental health professionals who have worked with couples, and probably most of the rest of us, we've heard of John Gottman, um, who some time ago worked in a laboratory where he would observe couples, and he developed an ability to predict with a significant amount of certainty whether or not the couple will end in divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And long story short, 4 indicators that the couple was not doing well are contempt, defensiveness, stonewalling, and criticism.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a very mainstream idea. I'm also a fan of David Data.
Oh, I
I
don't
don't know
know
if you've
him.
heard of him.
No,
Yeah, no, he's worth a Google. He
I'll
wrote,
definitely check him out.
yeah, he's written a bit about gender, a bit about sex, and a lot of his stuff is based on Eastern thought. Um, if I remember right, in Way of the Superior Man, he talks about how essentially female psychology is likely to reject criticism outright, or even feel hurt by it,
Mm-hmm.
more so than men.
Mm-hmm.
This was his idea. Whether or not you buy into that, you can triangulate that with John Gottman. I mean, here we have a new age David Data talking about the genders being different. And here we have John Gottman saying, regardless of gender, these are behaviors that are damaging to relationships, and criticism was, is an overlap for that. Criticism is bad for relationships.
Yeah.
So, so I share some methods with my clients on how to communicate their feelings, how to communicate their wants without criticizing.
Yeah.
And then quite often they come back the next session and they say, it didn't work. I'm like, okay. I mean, I know the answer. I know that it's not that it didn't work.
Yeah.
I know that either they didn't quite do it right, because
Yeah.
there's actually there's some details. There's some detailed distinctions, not that hard to learn, but can still take a little bit of time. Or it worked, but the problem is that they're being attached to immediate results.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing.
As in one idea that I discuss is that good communication in a relationship cannot be measured by whether your spouse responds favorably at the time.
Yep.
And one way that I frame it is, if you are communicating feelings about something that your spouse does, or if you're telling them you want them to do something that's different from what they're doing, and both of these things are important things to do, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
We also have to accept that no matter how gentle we are about it, no matter how nonviolent our communication is, it can still be received in a jarring way. And so one of the ways that I frame it with clients is, allow them to process the message however you want, however they must, however they will process it. For example, if a man comes home from work and his wife comes home from work, and they start cooking, and she starts putting her bag and her coat and everything on like backs of the chairs in the kitchen. Now, I'm not saying that this is a right or wrong thing for her to do at all. Actually, I'm coming up with this just because it's something that I've actually commented on, and I've learned that it goes best when I'm not judging.
Mm-hmm.
So, if in such a situation the man were to say to his significant other, I feel frustrated when you put your purse and your jacket on the back of the chair when we're getting ready to clean up for dinner. I want you to put your stuff in the closet or up in our room. There's absolutely nothing wrong with saying that. Mm-hmm. It's certainly better to say it than it is to like silently resent for it.
Yes.
And it also doesn't matter whether or not there's a right or wrong about where to put the stuff.
Mm-hmm. If
you have a feeling and in your mind you're connecting it to a thing that your significant other does, it's healthy and it's open to express that, to express that feeling. And if you want your significant other to do something different, then it is a good idea to state that.
Yeah.
But it's also a good idea to be very detached about their initial response.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And not judge whether or not it went well.
Yeah.
Because no matter how gentle you are about it, if you tell somebody to do something differently, they might feel quite offended. They might storm out. They might look at you funny the next time you see them. The message, though, over the long term, it's going to have a much more significant and positive effect if we are not attached to how the other person responds.
Yeah.
If we can just allow their response, I stated my feeling, I stated what I want. and then the other individual then expresses their feeling, and then they do what they want. Okay, here we have two individuals who are being true to their own experience. There is nothing bad about that. But if we're very afraid of conflict,
Yeah.
then there is.
Yep.
So in such a situation, it is so and this is one of the counterintuitive behaviors. The counterintuitive behavior is to detach from the short-term response.
Yep.
Because quite often when people are anxious about their relationships and they attempt some good communication with their significant other, if the significant other responds in a very upset way and storms out, well, we actually feel an instinct to follow them,
Right.
and to insist.
Right. Try and fix it or get upset about
right.
it. Yeah.
What is going on here? I'm communicating well. This isn't fair.
Where's my A? I'm supposed to get an A. I did what my therapist told me to do.
I did what my therapist said to do, and now you are behaving with contempt, which means, according to my therapist, I am now winning this. Right. So so it just in basic terms, like what just choose two pretty starkly different responses to that. So one response is, so after she storms out, and she's not always going to storm out, but if she does, if she does, or if she just doesn't say anything.
Yeah.
But let's say she storms out. For many men, the counterintuitive response is to insist, because they think they're fighting for the relationship. So they're going to go up and they're going to follow her upstairs, and they're not going to let her process the message as she needs. So they're going to say, no, I need this from you. I need acknowledgement. I mean, I'm opening up to you. I need you to be receptive when I'm opening up to you.
Yeah.
So is that appealing? Does that strike you as something that would invite you to open up and be receptive if somebody was trying to push you for a certain response?
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I know me personally, that's when I really shut down. When I feel pushed, it is a shutdown response, and I won't give an inch. And there's some of my stubbornness coming in, but I think that is a very natural reaction as well, because someone wants something from you and they want it in a certain way. So it's almost like you have to perform because you're having a feeling. So anything that's coming out other than that feeling would feel inauthentic. And so you're in a real tough situation when that happens.
So let's imagine you are the woman in this situation. And these ideas, I believe, they are valid regardless of gender.
Yeah,
I know more about how men think than how women think for some reason.
I can't think of it off the top of my head, but
but let's imagine that you got home from work, you put your jacket and your purse on the chair in the kitchen, and your significant other says to you, I feel frustrated when I'm working on cleaning up the kitchen and you're putting stuff in the kitchen. I want you to put your stuff in the closet. Let's imagine, I don't think you would, but let's imagine that you say, all right, I had a long day and you're talking to me like a child. I don't want that. And then you storm up to the bedroom.
Yeah.
How would it work from there? If the man was like, well, my plan was to make dinner, so I'm going to make dinner. Right? And then he goes up a little bit later, knocks on the door and says, hey, hon, I want to see dinner together.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good statement there. So yeah, by having that time would have allowed me to cool off, right? Because again, I probably had a rough day, and then so I'm saying, oh, I'm, getting home, I just want to relax, like or whatever. So it would give me time to cool off. And so then I likely wouldn't be so reactive. And then you did those magic words there that you talk about in your book, that I want to eat dinner with you, or I'd like to eat dinner with you, or however you phrased it.
I phrased it.
That I want, right?
I want,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, which is really powerful because because there was the conflict, could feel like a little sever of the connection, right?
Yeah.
So by you coming in and saying that you want to eat dinner with me, just automatically speaks to the doubts that I could be having in my head around the severed connection that just happened. And then I know that you still love me, you still want to spend time with me, I'm still important to you, just from those few words. And that's one thing that I really like about, that method that you talk about, because I think it's powerful on so many levels. And by you not being reactive to my emotions shows me emotional maturity and the ability to handle me. Now, which is a whole maybe another thing, right? I think of like needing to feel safe even in our most difficult moments, and I am loved even in my most difficult moments, that this person I'm with, I guess, is strong enough, and therefore I feel more safe. If that makes sense.
It does. It does. And there are some very great thinkers, I believe. For example, David Data would talk about when a man expresses strength, even if it's in a conflict with his significant other, expressing strength by remaining assertive when there's disagreement rather than backing down. Then that strength is like I'm showing my significant other that I am strong enough, that I'm strong enough in my convictions, I'm strong enough in what matters to me, I'm strong enough in terms of what I want to do, that I am going to continue to honor that and stand up for it. And I'm not going to give it up just because she's expressing disapproval,
right?
Or because she's expressing any other
if she's not perfect, if she's not in that how she's supposed to be, sort of thing. And because then if you came up immediately and tried to push and so forth, then it would be like, I can't have a minute. I can't just be myself. And if he's doubting the relationship because of a moment, like that shows weakness, right? Like, does he have one foot out the door so much that one conflict causes this, that doesn't feel secure, that doesn't feel safe? So it really, the attachment issues really come out there. Yeah.
For sure. So when we began this section of our discussion, I don't remember exactly what the question was, but but we touched on some of these. We touched on some of the counterintuitive behaviors. We touched on using the word, oh, that's right, you asked me about the learning curve, or you asked me about
the implementation.
So sometimes it goes like sometimes it goes like this. Sometimes it goes like, it didn't work. I said, I feel frustrating. I feel frustrated when you do this thing. I want you to do this thing. And then we had a fight. And in the universe in which we are going to be using these counterintuitive behaviors, there's no such thing as we had a fight. There is, you were reactive or attached in response to her response.
Yep.
How would we have a fight if I say, I want you to do this, and she says, I want you to go F yourself and
Right.
your wants?
Yeah.
Are we already having a fight? Because I said, I want this. She said, screw you.
Right.
Is that a fight? Is that a fight? I mean, what if I am feeling solid? What if I know I'm a good person? What if I know that it takes more than her being upset to actually derail our relationship? What if I don't feel threatened by that? What if I could be receptive to how she's feeling? I could care about it, but what if I don't feel threatened by it?
Yeah.
Do we have a fight?
Yeah. And you bring up some really important points, that this work is a lot easier when we feel really secure in
Yes.
ourselves, in our decisions, and who we are, because that allows us to not detach from those outcomes. Whereas if we're looking to our spouse or significant other for the affirmation that I'm lovable and I'm good enough, et cetera, then that becomes threatened. And
Yes.
then your system kind of crumbles right then
Right.
and there. Yeah.
And we become defensive, which is
Yeah.
another one of John Gottman's Four
Yes.
Horsemen.
Yes.
It takes two people in a defensive state to have a fight. Something that I adore is when I'm working with a client and maybe we're doing some kind of deep work. We're resolving early traumas that
Mhm.
that are currently manifesting in their lives
Yeah.
as as feelings of inadequacy or easily feeling threatened. Sometimes the first indicator that for them that the work is really working for them is that their spouse's behavior has changed.
Mhm.
And I'm like, okay, so that's interesting. How has her behavior changed? And he says, maybe he says, well, we used to get in fights all the time, but now when she says something, it's not as mean, and I don't react to it. Maybe
Right. He
there's something.
changed.
Yes,
Yeah.
he changed.
Yeah.
But that's another very important thing when it comes to the idea of healing a relationship, is
Yeah.
that on the one hand, healing a relationship is not about changing the other person.
Right.
And this can be difficult. And this was difficult for me once upon a time, because I thought, okay, well, yes, there are ways in which I can change. There are ways in which I want to change. But if she doesn't change also, I mean, if she continues to do these things which are harmful for our relationship, then our relationship isn't going to be well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to suggest that that a truth that would be really good for people to take on, and maybe this is true of human beings regardless of gender, but I know it's true for men.
Mm-hmm.
And there are men talking about a thing called the red pill.
Oh,
Have you heard of it?
Yeah.
And it's based on the idea of the matrix. Like,
Yeah.
it's this viewpoint that once you hear about the viewpoint, you can't unsee it.
Yes.
And I'm not a fan so much of red pill thinking, because it objectifies women. It's misogynistic. So many of the ideas that red pill says about women are really also quite true about men. They're about, but I think a much better pill for men to take, a pill that represents a perspective, that once you take on the perspective, then you are forever going to see the world through that perspective, is that we have power to influence our relationships.
Yeah.
So probably the most ineffective way to get her to change her behavior is to need her to change her.
Yeah. Oof.
Probably
A lot of reasons why.
the most effective way starts with with being receptive, with being accepting if that's appropriate, you know, if
Mhm.
not, then boundaries are great.
Yeah.
But really working on ourselves,
Yeah.
because the better pill that I would recommend that men take is the belief that by doing different things, we can guide our relationships into much healthier states.
Yeah.
I mean, just imagine if men who believe that they fight, who believe we fight, right? If he believes that fights happen, if he believes that fights are a thing that is happening to him in his
Mhm.
relationship, if he instead were to be like, no, we only fight if we're both being defensive, if we're
Right.
both reacting
Yeah.
according to our fears to each other.
Yeah.
I tell her I want a thing. She takes that personally. She believes that it means that, I think she's not good enough. So then she yells at me. I feel like her yelling is horrible, and I'm scared because my whole life, especially when I was a kid, a woman yelling at me meant that I was bad.
Right.
Meant shame, right?
Yeah.
So then I react, and then she reacts. It keeps going.
Yep.
It keeps going until one person is like, you know what? Instead of just reacting like a robot, instead of reacting like you push my button, and then I react according to this fear-based program.
Yeah.
If instead I choose, you know what? I am going to, next time I feel that feeling, next time she says something and then I feel a feeling about it, I'm actually gonna notice that feeling. I'm gonna notice what is that feeling? Is it anger? Is it sadness? Is it fear? Is it guilt? Is it shame? And I am actually gonna welcome that feeling. Because if I'm not scared of the feeling, then the feeling is not driving me.
Yep.
So I'm instead going to welcome that feeling. I'm going to allow it to be there. And then I'm going to notice, I'm going to do a check with myself. Like, even though I'm feeling sad, I'm still in control of what I focus on.
Yeah.
I can still detect, squares or circles or red things in the room. I'm sorry, I'm going a little fast. I'm referring to another technique in the book.
Using mindfulness skills and so
right.
forth. And,
well, if I'm going to engage some mindfulness, a mindful way of dealing with this emotion, then I have the opportunity then to respond
Yes.
according to what really matters to me, instead of reacting according to my fears. Right. So this is a skill. If a couple is fighting, but one of them or both of them learn a skill of responding to their painful emotions with mindfulness, then they're not going to fight.
Right. Yeah.
Because they're not going to be reacting defensively to each other.
Yep.
So one bit of feedback that I get when a client learns about not criticizing is that they haven't learned everything about it. They might have said, they might have said, I feel sad when you do this thing. I want you to do this other thing. And then their significant other says, why are you telling me this? And then he says, because I really hate how rude you are. which not everybody recognizes this, but it's useful to think of that as criticism. Yeah. There's a lot that people think of, I'm just telling you the truth. There's a lot that people think is just calling it like they see that. But it really is criticism. Anytime we characterize somebody's behavior, or generalize about it, or blame them, right? But very reliably, when clients put this to work, when clients engage in this kind of expression of truth, then eventually they have the experience that they are actually feeling more present in the relationship,
Yeah.
right? They're not, they're not standing back resentful, afraid that their only choices are either, hold it all in with resentment or explode.
Right. Yeah.
And then also the relationships become closer, because even if it stings a little bit for somebody to tell you they want you to do something different from what you're doing, you can still say that with authenticity, with sincerity, with confidence and presence. It's our unhappy emotions can bring us together, can bring people closer, as long as they're not like, as long as people aren't violently throwing them at each other.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then it can even serve as this little means of connection. Like, hey, I put my my stuff in the closet. Aren't you proud of me? You can joke about it, you can flirt about it, you can connect about it, and you can really, bring the playfulness back into the relationship more easily.
More. I mean, so there are a number of ways of measuring success of communication in a relationship, other than did the person react favorably? Did they do what I wanted them to do right then, or did they get mad, right? One much better way is recognizing, okay, you succeeded in telling your truth without putting the responsibility for it on the other person. That there is already a success. That is you living in better integrity. So that's a success. Another is, regardless of whether or not they do the thing differently, is communication more open? And I don't mean right away. I don't mean in the following 10 minutes, but I mean, maybe what if today I tell somebody, I want you to, to put your jacket away. And then the next day, she says, I want you to stop tossing your socks behind the TV. If you just imagine like a ledge in a living room, and there's a TV, and like a large TV, and like there's lots of space behind the TV to hide socks.
This is a very specific example, by the way.
Yes, and so what if the next day she says, I really want you to put your socks in the laundry, or tuck them in your shoes or whatever, instead of tossing them behind the socks. Then what do we have? We have more open communication. We have two individuals who are respecting their own wants, and who are sharing them with each other. It's almost like these two people can then actually authentically get to know each other, and then that could even lead to sex.
Right? Yeah. Who would have think?
There was totally something else obviously I want to talk, but I can let whatever thought I forgot go. If you have thoughts.
Yeah. Well, I think I brought up kind of like the playful communication and things like that. I don't know if that sparks
playful. For me, I like playfulness. I mean, ever so often I'll try to, when we're watching TV, I'll try to like divert her. I'll say, like, the other day it didn't work. I said, hey, there's a shooting star over there out the window, and it didn't work.
It didn't work. I think you were trying too hard.
I was trying too hard.
You were just trying, and I guess that kind of goes back to that detachment from the outcomes that I think is so important, because I think we also try to get around that issue by pretending we're not attached to the outcome and just saying, I don't care what happens. If she freaks out, she freaks out. But if energetically in your body, in your system, you actually do care how it goes, people are more, I guess using the word intuitive, are more intuitive than you think, and they pick up on stuff even if they don't know why they're
Yes,
picking up on it. And if they
for sure.
feel desperation, if they feel neediness, if they feel the criticism on an
Mhm.
energetic level, it's still not going to work. And I think people
Yeah.
try to take these back roads or these shortcuts, and it
Mm.
just doesn't land in the same way.
Yeah, so there is a world of difference in terms of the effect that it has on our experience when we own our own emotional experience.
Yeah.
As as when we are not blaming it on the other person. And this is also a thing, that everybody does when they're not at their best, and
Mhm.
so it's not something to feel, to feel shame about.
Right.
Um, you know, Displacement. It's one of the defense mechanisms that Sigmund Freud talked about. Um, and it's pretty relatable when
Yeah.
somebody is frustrated about a thing. If they're frustrated about work, and then they trip on their child,
Mhm.
then yeah, it's entirely within the realm of possibility to
Right.
take that emotion out on the child. And but there's so much, there's so much power and integrity.
Yeah.
And I think that, and I think that it's also really good for people to start thinking about personal power
Yes.
as equaling integrity, not power over another person. This is power as in my ability, my responsibility take to take ownership of my own experience,
Yep.
right? But there's so much power to have a better experience, and so much power to behave the way that we really want to
Yes.
when we are owning our own emotions.
And this is my cup of tea and like what I focus on. So you're
Mhm.
speaking speaking to the right
Cool.
audience. But yeah, I talk about that all the time, that we're innately powerful. We don't realize how powerful we truly are. And by doing that work on ourselves and truly knowing our experiences, our feelings, what's driving it, the energy behind everything we say and we do, when you get into that nuanced phase, of the work, you really open up more and more innate inner power, and then you
Mm.
end up getting more what you want,
Yeah.
because you start to find little ways that you actually were getting in your own way, or like, the
Yes.
more and more I do the work, I'm like, oh shit, like I could have just said that, like, and you don't even, it doesn't even like dawn on you sometimes.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, the um the book deals with specifically with power and our emotions, and in several different ways in different places. But one of the ways that men really give up their own personal power, their own ability to influence their own experience, or to even influence their relationships, um, is by getting attached to needing their significant other's approval.
Yep.
And when we when our happiness is hinging on whether or not another person is expressing approval for us,
Mhm.
then by definition, I mean, if we feel like we need that,
Yeah.
then we have given our power away,
Yes,
because
exactly, they have the power. Yeah.
we are wholeheartedly motivated to figure out what to do in order to then get that approval.
Yeah.
And most people I know, men or women, don't actually like for other people to need their approval.
Right. That's a burden that you're putting on the other person as well. And that can be really heavy. And then we develop this high codependency and relationship of I need this, and then I need to give this to this person, and then you're missing your own life. Like you're spending all this mental and emotional energy around gaining approval from this other person
Right.
instead of just living your life and being present and
Yes.
feeling how amazing that feels. And we miss
Yes.
out on all of that.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's one's own feeling of security, and I think a lot of that develops as people have the experience that their emotions themselves are not going to hurt them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So if I come home and I see some negative emotion from my significant other,
Mhm.
if I interpret that as a lack of approval from her, or even if she says something, she says, I don't approve of this or that. Okay. If so, I might feel sad. I might feel fear. I might feel anger.
Mhm.
The way we give up our power is to try to make that sadness or fear or anger go away
Yeah.
by trying to then fix it, trying to
Yes.
get her approval.
Right.
The way that we take our power back is to be accepting
Yep.
of that fear, of
Yep.
of that anger, of that sadness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Healthy people are not people who only feel happy. Healthy people feel angry, sad,
Yeah.
afraid all the time.
Yeah.
But we welcome it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've gotten to a point where I can laugh at it a lot more now, which is really great. I'll notice the thought come in and I just laugh. I was like, oh, that's a funny one, Stace. That's a good joke. And and it just, yeah, it really makes a world of difference. And so we need to be able to handle, and I think the big one is shame,
Mm.
because then then we spend so much time by avoiding the shame, we have to then even gain the approval even more so from this
Right,
really needy, anxious place. And that is a relationship,
right.
oxygen, suffocation situation happening. And
Yeah.
people then go down that road, and it's all because they can't face the actual shame that they're feeling.
Yes, and I think a lot of times in these situations, it's not a significant other's behavior that makes us feel shame.
Hmm.
And this is really why psychotherapy for an individual is so helpful for
Yes.
repairing a
Like
relationship.
relationships. Yep, exactly. I
Yeah,
agree.
is
Yep.
is is that if if somebody were to say something to me and I were to react to it very aggressively or very, very uncomfortably,
Yep.
um, then the real question is what was already going on inside of me,
Yep.
that it almost makes it look like they have control over my nervous system.
Right. Yeah.
You know, they say, they she says a thing. It doesn't matter what she says. If I have unresolved feelings
Yep.
of shame, if I have unresolved, just a lot of emotional baggage within me,
Yeah.
then I am, in a way, I'm going to be like going through life looking for situations to blame those emotions on.
Yes. Yep.
So if she says something to me, she says, I do not approve of how you handle that thing.
Hmm.
I feel quite threatened by that, so the psychotherapy perspective is, okay, well, what is going on within me?
Yep.
Right? And then, and then by looking at why
Yep.
somebody would have such a reaction to that, by processing it, using whichever therapeutic modality, or even just learning to be very accepting and tolerant of that emotion.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I always ask people, I'm like, okay, well, what's the part of you that believes what they just said? What's the part of you that agrees with it? Which, might take some work to get the acceptance that that part even exists, because we have a lot of defenses built up around the vulnerability of the agreement. So we have to get through, we got to figure out how big that wall is and how strong it is and how to knock that down to then get to the part that does agree to some extent what had been said, and then that part needs, I guess, the quote healing or attention or whatever, and then as that gets resolved, then, because I'm like, or another question I like to ask people is like, well, if you with 100% of the cells in your body knew that you are lovable, how would you feel if someone said that to you? Well, I'd probably laugh it off, like, okay, whatever, like, okay, where'd that come from? Like, that makes no sense to me, right? Because if we don't agree, we don't react, and it's just like well, that was weird situation. But if we get upset, that means there's something inside.
For sure. So, so I want to ask a question to you as a woman who read the book.
Yes.
And feel free to plead the fifth.
Okay.
Okay. So I believe that this book, I believe that the ideas of this book are true for individuals regardless of gender.
Yeah.
Just recently, I recommended it to a female client, because it seemed, well, because she was really busy taking notes while I was sharing a couple of ideas, and I thought, well, the book is there, but I wrote it with men in mind.
Yeah.
Are there any ways in which, when you were reading the book, you were thinking, oh, okay, maybe this is a good thing to tell a man, but I don't quite get it from my perspective?
No, I think it's pretty on point for both genders. I'm trying to think, if there were any specific, or there could be maybe nuanced tweaks potentially, but I think, well, and I don't know if I'm the best person to ask, I guess, because, well, it also depends on what kind of relationship people want. I didn't realize what polarity coaching was until I switched my my job to a coach, and then you're friends with all these coaches on social media, and you see what submissive language looks, like they're teaching. So I guess it first goes back to, I think for the majority of people, this book is great for men and women. However, depending on what your goals are in the relationship and what you want that relationship to look like, then they probably want to be looking at your book anyways, and they wouldn't be listening to this anyways, if that's the case. But I guess that would be like the only difference, because I think they could probably find ways that women should communicate more, I guess they would say, more submissively, more femininely, and so forth. And so they would, but I think overall, but I'm not that, I guess I am that independent woman sort of prototype.
I think I think something just occurred to me. I want to run by you.
Yeah.
Because because I think that some of these actually might be more relevant to men than to women, because I think that some of these things are actually things that women might intrinsically already be doing a whole lot more of.
Maybe, although I
Well,
feel
let
like,
me
oh yeah, give me an
let
example.
me
Give
give
me an
this a
example.
shot. Let me give this a shot. Let me give this
Yeah.
a shot. So I have a guess. I have a guess that the reason why men have, in the last few years, in like the dating coaching, circles or whatever, the reason why men have been telling each other to be leaders, and the reason why that actually might have been providing some value, is not that being a man in and of itself is a reason to lead a woman. Right. And that's an idea which is shared a lot. And maybe there is some good truth in it. But
Yeah.
but I think even more basically, I think that in relationships, women are actually a whole lot more predisposed to take on leadership when it comes to the workings of the relationship.
Yeah, or I guess I was thinking too, like the criticism, example stuff we've been talking about. Because my first initial thought was, I feel like, I don't know if there's studies, I feel like on an overall, or this could be my skewed thought, is that women tend to be more critical. But women do have a more refined skill, because we're taught, well, make the man think it was his idea, right? Like we're taught these things where yeah, maybe like you said, like maybe we're kind of more advanced in how to communicate criticism or what we want in these ways that are that we're kind of maybe don't need, like you said, that may not need that guidance. But I've seen that maybe it go to a little too far at this point, where people play games with each other, they're testing each other, they're not communicating clearly. And I feel like I talked about that a lot with my clients, that stop testing, stop playing these games, and start to learn to communicate more clearly. And that tends to be difficult for women too, because we're taught to kind of do this in this back way, this sneaky way to get what you want.
Right. I see.
If that's helpful.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think for me, the idea about whether or not a man should be a leader in his relationship because he's a man, I think that's moot. Because I think that in a lot of relationships, if the relationship is struggling, I think probably one of the reasons it's struggling is that he is actually taking a passive stance, leaving a whole lot of stuff to her. Like if a man says, I went on a date but I wanted to kiss her, but it didn't happen. And so then I'm thinking, okay, so what does it mean? I mean, like who has the agency? So does that mean that you would, like, she would do the work to make it obvious, she would decide, it's all on her to decide that now's the time to kiss, and then it's her decision to tell you, now kiss me. I mean, that is, like, I remember first kisses as being like incredibly, like thrilling, but also scary. And no, and I mean, I think that if you and somebody are going to end up kissing, I think you really do that person a service by collaborating I mean, this doesn't, of course, this doesn't mean ignore all cues
Right,
and
like,
just
yeah,
plant
yeah,
a
listen
dirty
to,
mouth on her. But for example, if you want to kiss her and you say, I want to kiss you,
yeah,
good for you. I mean, when
right,
clients would tell me, um, I want her to, to let me know that it's okay to do
yeah,
so.
no.
Okay, well, let her know that it's time for her to let you know whether or not it's okay. So
Yeah,
that,
yeah, and I do, and I'm also thinking about how I work with my clients, and I definitely push, I think, men more so than women to be a lot more directive, to lead, to do those things. And also depends on the relationship and what I know about them and who they're with and so forth. So it's obviously, based off of that as well. It's not like, doesn't fit the person, but because also there is something interesting too, then I guess I'll bring up, like, for me personally, thinking, because I am like this like strong independent woman thing, but didn't realize how much I like a man to make all the decisions, or not all the, but like, to be decisive, to take the lead, to do that. And I never knew that that was something I wanted or needed in a relationship until like way later on. And I thought that's interesting. So I think that's important, I guess, to explore in some way, somehow. But I think the thing is to not compromise what we want in the beginning of relationship. Like,
sure.
so I think in the past I would think, well, I want this relationship, so I have to take a more active role or a more leadership role, or whatever, to get what I want. But then I'm not presenting myself in the way of how I want to be in a relationship and be able to receive and be led. And then you end up finding yourself in relationships that aren't really fitting what you actually want, because you're compromising from the beginning. And the reason why you're compromising from the beginning is out of scarcity. So, like, if a man wants to lead, he just needs to lead with confidence. And if a woman wants to receive, she needs
Yes.
to allow herself to receive. And then you'll match up with the person that you actually want a little bit easier.
Yeah, because the goal is to have a relationship between two independent people
Yep.
who like to do stuff together.
Yeah.
And it's inevitable that relationships don't always start out feeling that way.
Yep.
You know, there tends to be a little bit of a, some amount of love sickness
Yeah.
where this person is just the best thing ever to happen to me, and then eventually you realize, oh, this person is a human
It's a
being that I
human.
like,
Yeah.
to have in
Yeah.
my life. But I think, yeah, but um, so much of um, so much heartache, so much divorce can be avoided by people valuing themselves
hmm
and being true to themselves, being true to what they want, being true to what they'll tolerate from
hmm
the very beginning.
Yeah.
For one thing, if you're valuing yourself, you're going to be far more attractive,
Right. Yes, that's true. Yeah.
right? So many people wonder, why can't I get somebody interested in me? And a lot of the times the reason is they are walking around broadcasting an invitation to a codependent relationship. Yeah.
Right. Or even that question shows
Mhm.
it. Just even the question, why can't I get
Yes.
someone interested? Like, the question
Right.
alone is starting off on a real, real rocky
Yeah.
ground right there.
Ever
Yeah.
see the movie Swingers?
I don't think so.
It's a fantastic movie, and I recommend you watch it.
Okay. I'll write that
Yep.
down.
Yep. So, if you're drunk or high when you watch it, and I've never been drunk or high, so I wouldn't know. Well, anyway, but if you're drunk or high and you watch it, you might get the impression that the movie is about picking up women.
Mm.
but the movie is actually about the futility of the inauthenticity
Yeah.
that, of the inauthentic approaches to, to form relationships. Um, so one one idea. The reason I mention this is that the 3-day rule is shared in this movie, and the and with a lot of men's dating advice, I like to ask myself, what is the reason why men are finding this to be good advice, even if there are reasons why the advice isn't great. It's still good to wonder, why are men swearing by these ideas?
Yeah.
And one reason why the 3-day rule, the rule that if you meet somebody and you get that person's number, and then you would wait 3 days to reach
Right.
out to them.
Yeah.
One reason why you would do that is if you are in an insecure, low self-valuing,
Mm,
approval seeking, people pleasing state where you believe that your life will be great as long as somebody's willing to love you.
yeah.
If you're in that state, then, well, you can hide that by you can hide that a little bit by not texting right away.
Right.
You would probably broadcast that if on the other extreme, as soon as you get home, you text them, several times. You text them your life story.
Right. Yeah. There's a
You know,
balance.
and so I think the reason why a lot of dating advice works in the short term, is that
Hides.
it's about how to act like you're emotionally and
Yeah. And you're not being yourself either. And maybe this is like interesting. And I also noticing this is a client of mine, and he's also a Sagittarius like you. So he has a pretty intense personality, and he likes to do things and so forth. And
Mhm.
so he'd kind of get himself all worked up about all these things. And I've been encouraging him more to just do that gut response. And so if it is like, do you want to text her, or what do you want to actually say to her, or share
Yeah,
actually how you feel, like say what you want to say? And it's like, well, what if she doesn't? Well, fuck her, then don't see her again. You know what I mean? Like if it
right.
doesn't work out, then it's good that you know now.
Yes. It's so much
Because
better.
right.
It's
So
so much
yeah, you
better
need
to
to
be rejected for who you are
right. Then
than
who
than to be accepted
for who you're not.
for
Yeah.
some mirage that you're putting up,
Right.
because then everything is going to go wrong, because then you show up for the date still thinking, I gotta hide. I gotta
Right.
hide who I
Yeah.
really am.
It's calculated, and it's just, yeah, it doesn't flow. And yeah, and it's been really cool kind of watching him really take this on and do that. And then his experiences are so much more rich and
Right.
fulfilling and so forth, because he's showing up for who you. I'm like, you're an intense person, so you don't want to attract someone into you that doesn't want that doesn't,
Right.
isn't, because then that's going to show that that's not going to
Yes.
work when you want to
Right.
go out on the boat every day, and they're just like, I just want to sit at home. Like that's going to be an issue.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, so at the outset of a relationship, it's really good. And a lot of times the idea of like be yourself, it's not really meaningful advice, because if somebody isn't if somebody needs that advice, then they probably don't really value themselves enough to like
Mm,
show up with
to
themselves.
show up in
Yeah.
that way. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But but yeah, so one one yeah, one example of beginning a relationship inauthentically is by hiding
Yeah.
what you've really got. And the movie Swingers, which you're probably going to watch one of these days, because I keep sending
You're
those,
just
those.
like planting the seeds. Yeah. Just,
Yeah, the he actually finds some success in relationship building once he cuts the shit.
yep.
It's really cool to watch. Um, So that's one. But then another is being true to what we want to experience, what we're willing to do. Another word for this is boundaries.
Yeah.
Quite often, men are coming to me with complaints about how their significant others treat them and how they've been treating them for a while.
Mhm.
I think a lot of this is preventable by being true to what kind of relationship you want to be in, what you're willing to do, what you're willing to experience
Yeah.
from the beginning. And I think the number one reason that if men don't do that, is if they are just too attached to the idea of this relationship succeeding, or if
Yes.
they're too attached to their significant other's approval.
Yep. Yep.
Right. So let's say, let's say they've been in a relationship for a little while, the honeymoon phase is over, she starts calling him names, and he maybe he reacts angrily to it, but he doesn't actually set a boundary.
Yeah. Right.
Because what does that mean? I mean, if I set a boundary about her calling me names, then does that mean that if she keeps calling me names, then there's a possibility the relationship would end? Well, I absolutely don't want that to happen, because I'm in a mindset that this relationship is everything. This relationship is my life.
Right. Yeah.
And and the psychology of a lot of people, it's very understandable for people to be very attached to their relationships.
Yeah.
But I think that for a lot of men, that psychology is rooted in unresolved attachment with their mother.
Yep. Probably. Yeah. And just, yeah, it's hard. But yeah, like you can't set a boundary if you're not willing to follow through with the consequences. And
Yes.
so it's like, with relationships, that's with parenting, it's with any relationship really with another person. And so therefore we need to have that inner foundation and confidence and esteem and all of that, because that's the backbone in which the consequences reside. And so if you don't have a backbone, then you are likely going to find yourself, I guess, in a compromised situation, not because the person you're with is a terrible person, but it is very much human nature that, if I get to just act a way that is easy for me, we tend to just act a way that's easy. And if there's no consequences to it,
Right.
like if you just have a bowl of cookies out and they say don't
Yes.
eat the cookies, but there's no consequences to eating the cookies, it takes a very
Right.
special person to not eat the cookies,
Well, so yeah, so I guess what I'm hearing you allude to is that boundaries in relationships actually help people to do better, to
Yes.
be better, to be true to themselves. Like, if Joe tells Jennifer, you know, this is beyond a want. A want is something that I'm going to say that I want, and then
Mhm.
and then we're going to work with it. But a boundary, this is something that I need.
It's a
I
requirement.
need you to stop calling me names. I need you to treat me with
Respect.
with respect. Then there's a very good chance that Jennifer is a person who, if on a good day you ask, what really matters to you? She might say, well, love, kindness, respect. These could actually be her values.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very, as you were alluding to, with the plate of cookies. And, I'm just wondering, in the break room, is that plate of cookies still there? Right. But sometimes if somebody says, hey, there's a boundary here, that boundary will actually help me to do better.
Yeah.
If Joe says, I want you to treat me with respect. I want you to treat me with love. I
Mhm.
need you to treat me with love and respect. If he says to her, I am not willing to be in a relationship
Yes.
where I am
Treated like shit.
treated with this kind of contempt,
Yeah.
then that actually, I mean, that might not be asking her to go against her true nature. That might actually be asking her to be more true.
Right. It invites
More
her
true nature.
into her values and kind of back to your like leading the relationship towards improvement, then setting the boundaries actually does that. And because it's hard, so if I was the woman in this situation, and if the man didn't set that boundary and let me treat him like shit, I can't respect a man that lets me treat him like shit, which sounds kind of weird, if that makes sense. Like, then then you lose respect for
Right.
him because he's basically saying my standards are so low. I'm
Right.
willing to be verbally abused by you. And so then the attraction
Yeah.
really just
It just sinks. Yeah.
is gone. So by
Yeah.
setting that boundary, it's like, oh shit, yeah, that's right. Now I respect him. And now I'm going to act respectful because he's
Yes.
respecting himself.
But this, but the other side of that is boundaries are a risk.
Mm-hmm.
They
Yeah.
are they
Yes.
are
Yep.
a very
Yes.
very very healthy risk,
Yeah.
and but it really everything good in a relationship is a risk.
Right. All
Relationships
relationships
themselves
are a risk. Yes.
are a risk. Are a risk.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
we it is very possible that even if somebody is very very loving and gentle and eloquent when they communicate a boundary, it's very possible for somebody to say, you know what, where I am in my life, I I need to be in a relationship where this isn't what I'm told right now.
Mhm.
Or, or they could respond however, but then continue to treat with disrespect.
Right.
Um, I guess I don't know how to say this any better way than, um, sometimes the best thing is for relationships to end.
Mhm. Yeah. Like it's good to set the standard. And if it doesn't follow through, then you need to, not be afraid of it ending. And yeah, I know you brought this up too recently. And there, because there's so much shame, right? There's societal judgment around the relationship ending, or
Yes.
how am I going to explain this to so and so, and what is everyone going to think, or
No
what
kidding.
about, or the finances, or what am I going to, like there's so much in it that and it makes sense. There's a lot of like survival feelings, like we are talking about earlier, the instincts,
Right.
right? So all those get really activated, right, in so many ways with the threat of a relationship ending, which requires more and more of that inner work and foundation and backbone. So it makes sense why it's so difficult to look at. But I think if you want to have a happy, thriving, intimate relationship, then the boundaries and those risks are required to get where you want. Otherwise, you're in this purgatory state, and a lot of people acquiesce to that place.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, and this is, this also requires people to deal with, with like a larger level of uncertainty.
Yeah.
I mean, a human being can do all the right things. Actually, no, human being cannot do all the right things. But even if a human being were going
Maybe.
to do, even if a man were going to do all the right things, and get all, and marry somebody with who gives all the indicators of being able to join with, with this man in a great relationship, there is still the possibility that the relationship could end because, because our significant others have free will. And,
Yep.
and one thing that feels really risky is to recognize, everybody who's married, everybody who has, has a boyfriend or a girlfriend, even children, like everybody we have a relationship with, no matter how much it feels like that relationship is mutually appreciated, that person has the free will to end the relationship.
Yeah, and we shouldn't, I guess, stop them. We can share our feelings, we can say what we want, but then now we're venturing into control and manipulation of the other person, and then it becomes really about us and what we want versus what they want. And it's
I
a
think
thing.
that an important element of just dealing well in the world and having the best relationships that we can is to recognize we ultimately do not have control.
Yep. Yeah. We don't.
Of what anybody else does.
And it's actually great if you think about it too, because we are often trying to get security, certainty, but that really kills the relationship. It's really awesome to be with someone knowing that they could leave any second, but they're choosing to be with you. So to be in a really healthy relationship, it's acknowledged that either party could step out at any second, but they're choosing on a daily basis that you're the person I want to be with. And that is so powerful. And by trying to suffocate it with certainty and security, we really miss out on that experience.
It's so these days a part of my routine, usually on days that I work, I'll get coffee by myself. On days that I don't, usually I'll grab my coffee by myself, and then I'll have coffee with my wife at home. But usually when I'm getting coffee by myself, once it kicks in, I'll just spontaneously find myself really appreciating that she and I are, as you're describing, that she and I are on a daily basis choosing to have a relationship with each other, and it really is something to appreciate, because for most people, in the society in which we live, there are options. Being married is a lifelong commitment if we continue to make that, if we continue to act on that commitment every day.
Yeah. And so I think there's a lot of magic there, and and I think it's actually more free and deeper that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think it is. I think, if you interview any immortal people, like if you go on to into movies about people who live forever, isn't there a trope in the movies where they're like, it's been enough, I wish I could transform into a mortal and then die? I don't know, which movie am I thinking of?
I don't know. Well, did you watch The Good Place on Netflix? That's a TV series. That's a good one.
I heard it was really good.
Yeah, and that you kind of gets into that towards the end there. But yeah, I guess it reminds me of a quote. But yeah, we need to die. Yeah, one of my favorite quotes was by Ray Kurzweil, he's like a optimist on AI research, and this is the book from 1999.
Yeah.
But then he got really weird, and he's like trying to resurrect his father from the dead. So it's weird
Okay.
that he wrote this,
I
that
hope
death,
that goes well.
right?
I said, I hope that goes well.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
But it's basically like death gives meaning and value to our lives. It gives importance and value to time. Time would become meaningless if there were too much of us.
Yeah.
And he says, if death were inevitably put off, our human psyche would end up like the gambler on the Twilight Zone episode. So it's just like, yeah, so that's kind of like a tangent, because then I guess we talk about like our time here and all that, but we know that it's temporary, and we have the freedom to choose what to do with that, who to be with, where to put our time. And I think when we really are able to look at that, then yeah, I want the best. And so I'm going to need to do really scary shit, like set boundaries and
Yep.
put myself out there and say what I actually want to give myself the chance to live the life that I want to live during
Yes.
however long I'm going to be here,
Yeah.
So
Well, great. Well, I mean, on that note, I'm just
I
thinking
feel like
about
that's a good
how.
end note, right?
No, I do. We're talking about how, we're talking about how time being finite makes the whole
Right.
thing more beautiful.
Right.
So
Perfect.
great. Well, I really do appreciate you hosting this, and I appreciate your encouragement.
Yeah, and so I guess for those watching, how can people find your book, find you? Yeah.
So the book is Relationship Repair for Men, Counterintuitive something. Hold on a sec.
Just relationship
Relationship,
repair for men, you'll find it.
yes.
Type it in on
Relationship,
Amazon,
yes.
right?
Counterintuitive, yeah. So relationship repair for men, counterintuitive behaviors that restore love to struggling relationships by Michael Giles. So if you go to Amazon and you do a search for relationship repair and then you put in GILES, then you'll see it. It's available on Kindle now. It'll be available in paperback in a couple of weeks.
Nice.
And then also, if this video is on a YouTube or something, then there's probably a link underneath.
Yep, I'll put all the links for you.
Very cool. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Stacy.
You're welcome.